Hi, I'm Steve Trovato. I'd like to talk to you about classic country guitar sounds. Sounds so recognizable that they've actually become the signature of some of the world's greatest country guitarists. I'd also like to talk about some of the techniques required to be able to produce and duplicate these sounds using your own gear. But first, let me say something about effects. Effects are what I call icing on the cake, subtle ways to enhance an already good sound. A lot of great sounds can be produced by using effects, but you have to start with a great guitar tone. There are some tried and true classic matchups like a Les Paul and a Marshall, or a Fender Strat or Telecaster, and a Fender Deluxe or Twin Reverb like I have back here. So before we start with effects, let me talk for a minute about how to get a good tone for country guitar. I usually start with no effects whatsoever and plug into the clean channel on my amp. Be sure and use the bridge pickup on your guitar. You want a warm, clean, thick, twangy tone. I prefer single coil pickups, but humbuckers work well too. Crank up the treble on your amp to about 7 and the bass to 5. If you have a mid-range control, set it on 5 and set the reverb to around 4. I like a set of slinky 9 through 42 strings, and a maple fingerboard really adds pop. That should give you a good starting tone, and here's what it sounds like. The first effect I'd like to talk about is a compressor. I prefer the small stomp box versions available from any number of companies. A compressor's job is to add sustain and snap to your sound. I usually set the tone knob to match the tone already coming from my amp so I don't have more treble or bass. I set the level a bit hotter so that I can use it to boost the volume for my solos. Attack and sustain are set according to taste, but I usually set the attack so that it matches the feel of my amp and guitar when the compressor's off. This way the effect isn't really overbearing. Not enough attack, I'll make your notes sound like they're being squeezed through a toothpaste tube. Check this out. First I'm going to play this lick without the compressor on. Now watch what happens when I add the compressor. See how long it sustains? You know, one of the most recognizable sounds in country guitar, it doesn't come from a stomp box or the amp, it actually comes from your fingers. It's called chicken picking. Now, what is chicken picking? Chicken picking is a sound where you alternate on one string between your pick and middle finger, and the sound sounds, well, like a barnyard chicken. The way it's done is this. What I'm going to do is fret the second string at the 7th fret, and then put my middle finger on the underside of that string, and then come down with my pick and hit the string. The sound should be a percussive thump. And then I'm going to come with my middle finger and snap the string up. So if I repeat that motion over and over again, I get this sound. Now as you get better at it, you can gradually bend that note up so you get this sound. Here's a chicken picking lick you can play in the key of A over this sort of a feel. The technique for playing double stops is about the same, except you need your ring finger to mute a second string. Fret these two notes on strings 3 and 2. Now with your right hand, put your middle finger on string 3 and your ring finger on string 2. Then you come down with your pick on string 3 and you get your percussive thump. Then you snap both fingers upward so you get 2 notes and you alternate between the 2. Now here's a lick you can play using that technique. This lick goes from a C 7th chord to an F chord and is played, as I remember, by Ray Flack on an old Ricky Skaggs album. And here's what it sounds like. Another great chicken picking technique can be demonstrated by playing this popular lick. For this sound, play triplets on the 3rd string using alternate picking while you mute with the heel of your right hand. And then use your middle finger on the high string and let it twang. And a little slower. So now I think I'll go back with the band and play a little bit for you and see if I can demonstrate all these chicken picking techniques that we just talked about. And I'm going to use my Seafoam Green ESP, basically a stock Telecaster guitar, and this twin reverb amp I have behind me. So let's get it going. You can hear some great examples of this technique on some of the old Emmylou Harris, Everly Brothers, and Elvis Presley recordings with James Burton as a guitarist. Also, listen to Pete Anderson with the Dwight Yoakam Band. Another great country sound is the banjo roll. It's by far the most technically challenging because of the right-hand hybrid picking. Here's what it sounds like. Now let me play it a little slower. To do this one, you need to start with a sharp, twangy tone and definitely use your bridge pickup. My suggestion is to let your middle and ring finger nails grow to about 1/8 of an inch. Now I use clear nail polish to strengthen them to keep them from breaking. Another trick that I learned is to use a pick that's about the same thickness as your fingernails so that you get a consistent sound on each string. In my case, it's a 96 millimeter. And next thing you need to do is angle your right hand downward a little bit so that your fingers are pulling straight up for more snap. You know, when you're talking country guitar, you have to talk a little bit about the king. Chet Atkins and his sounds and techniques have been copied by more guitarists than anyone else. He took the style of Merle Travis and honed it into his own thing. His career has spanned over 50 years and he's recorded over 200 albums. He uses a thumb pick exclusively and to play muted ostinato bass lines over a melody that he plays using his fingers. The thumb pick actually frees up your first finger and enables you to play more involved melodies. You need to find a thumb pick that fits your thumb snugly and doesn't roll around or fall off your hand when you're playing. The bass notes being played at the same time as the melody produces the illusion of two guitars playing. Now when I play this Gretsch guitar, which I consider a very versatile guitar, I find that it sounds perfect for this style of country guitar rather than the twangy Telecaster stuff. So let me demonstrate a Chet Atkins style riff here and see what it sounds like. Now, one of the staple effects for country guitars is delay. Again, the type doesn't matter. I have a lot of different ones, but today I brought another small stomp box. I'm going to show you 4 distinctly different delay settings, which I consider very important. The first setting I have is the rockabilly sound. This one sounds best when you play it in a boogie shuffle pattern, but you can use it in almost any feel. First, set the delay time somewhere between 125 and 150 milliseconds, depending on the tempo of the song. Set the volume of the repeat at about half to 3/4 of the original, and set the feedback at 0 so that the number of repeats is 1. Now play a boogie pattern in short staccato muted bass notes and check out what happens. Here it is first without the delay on. By the way, I'm muting with the heel of my right hand. Now watch. For a good example of this, check out the Stray Cats with Brian Setzer on guitar. Okay, let's bring the band back up now and see if we can't sound like a rockabilly roundup. Another great delay sound is a trick I learned from Albert Lee, but I've also heard Ray Flack and The Edge from U2 use it also. It's great for playing over fast tempos because you don't have to work so hard. I always like that. Set the delay time for between 275 and 325 milliseconds depending on the tempo of the song. What you're actually trying to create is a dotted eighth note. Set the feedback at 0 for 1 repeat and the level to match the volume of the original. Play steady eighth notes and listen to the effect. So what I'm going to do here is start with the delay off, and I'm going to play these eighth notes. Now watch what happens when I turn on the effect. You really need to play in time to pull this trick off or you'll get out of sync with your band. Try playing a scale in diatonic thirds or a major or minor arpeggios. Let me go back with the band right now and see what this thing sounds like. Here's another trick I learned from Albert Lee for fattening up a thin single coil tone. I've also seen Brent Mason and a lot of the Nashville guys use this one. You're going to set the delay time between 35 and 42 milliseconds. If you don't have a numerical readout, just turn the delay time down until you can't hear the note actually doubled anymore, but it still sounds thicker than it would without the effect on. That's a good approximation. It's a kind of a subtle effect that you don't really notice until you turn it off. Here's what it sounds like with the effect off. And if I turn the effect on, I get this. Off. On. The last delay effect is probably the most popular. It's a quick slapback that gives your sound more personality and sounds great live or on tape. It's an effect that you can pretty much leave on all the time. What you're going to do is set the delay time for about 175 milliseconds. Feedback at 0 so you get one repeat, and the level at about 1/3 of the original. It helps to match the delay time to the tempo of the song, but it isn't really necessary, and you'll recognize this one right away. A real neat contemporary sound that's been popularized by guitarist Brent Mason on about every hit record coming out of Nashville in the last 5 years is a real subtle sound of delay, compressor, and chorus together. The delay is set at about 40 milliseconds just for thickening. The compressor is added for sustain. Brent actually prefers an old MXR Dynacomp. And the chorus is added to give a sound of spaciousness so that it doesn't sound so in your face. Of course, the chorus sounds great mono, but since most choruses are stereo anyway, I've decided to use 2 amps since I have them here, the Deluxe and the Twin. A great example of Brent's sound is the work he's done with Brooks and Dunn on their Platinum albums. Now here's the sound of my guitar with no effects on it. Now if I add my compressor, chorus, and my delay, this is what I get. Being able to emulate a pedal steel guitar is another essential sound for your bag of tricks. For this one, we're going to use a compressor, volume pedal, and a delay. The delay should be set for about 450 to 500 milliseconds. Feedback should be set to give you 3 or 4 repeats, and the level at about 1/3 of the original. Play your notes with the volume down, and then slowly swell the sound in using your volume pedal. By the way, my volume pedal is set up so that it comes in after all of my effects. And here's what I get. You know, I need to say something about rhythm guitar. Rhythm guitar in a country band is probably the most important thing that you need to know how to do. Usually in the olden days, rhythm guitar was played by an acoustic guitar, but since you're playing electric most of the time, you need to be able to sound as much like an acoustic as you can. So the way you can do that on an electric guitar is, first of all, play open chords down in the open position and turn your volume down and strum harder. That way it sounds more acoustic. Then what you're going to do is accent 2 and 4. Now, in one of your smaller bar-type country bands, you would probably be the only guitar player. So you're going to have to assume all the roles of both acoustic, lead playing, and electric rhythm playing. In a larger band, a more professional touring band, I'd say, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 acoustic guitars. Now, what's going to happen with that is they'll all be playing the same thing, exactly, same chord voicing, same strumming pattern, everything. And that's going to be the role of that. Now, you're the electric guitar player now. What's going to happen with you is you're going to play very sparse fills in answer to the vocals in a kind of a call and response effect. In other words, the one thing you never want to do is step on the vocals. You're going to play around the vocals, in between the vocals. Answer the vocals with maybe a bit of the melody of the song. And typically what happens is you also have a violin player, fiddle player, or a pedal steel player, and a piano player, or all 3. In which case, you'll be designated a certain portion of the song where you're to play the fills. Maybe you play the fills in the first verse, pedal steel plays them in the second verse, piano plays them in the third verse, like that. Other than that, you're probably going to be playing small single note melodic rhythm ideas. I have a 61 Stratocaster that I use a lot, not so much for country, but for crossover gigs where I need a really versatile sound, something where I need a mellow jazz sound and something where I need a country sound, because I find it I can rewire my Strat so that I have a tone control for the bridge pickup that takes some of the high end off of it, so I can use it for country. So that's probably my primary guitar. When I do gigs that are just country, I love a Telecaster, especially with a maple neck. I have one with a rosewood fingerboard, but it doesn't quite have the pop that a maple neck. It's almost, you cannot not have a maple neck to sound really authentic at this style. I love these Seymour Duncan pickups. He made them for me. They're fairly hot. They're hotter than a standard Telecaster replacement pickup. But since I usually incorporate a lot of blues, which has a little bit of distortion in with my country playing, I need a pickup that's a little bit hotter, and stock Telecaster pickups don't distort very well. So these things have a nice kind of crossover sound. And then I have a Les Paul that I use when I play Southern rock, because you get a Les Paul and a Marshall together and it's killer. It's just, that's the sound.
Can a person play a Les Paul on a country gig?
Sure. A person can play a Les Paul on a country gig. Make sure that when you play a Les Paul on a country gig, you do use the bridge pickup, and you do keep the tone all the way up. Otherwise, it's liable to sound too bassy and you're going to lose the punch. In Nashville, they're using these Glaser Telecasters now, which are basically a Telecaster that's a hollow body, but it doesn't have any holes in it. It just has a hollow chamber in it. So it kind of sounds a little bit like a hollow body, but still has that pop of a Telecaster. It's a little rounder sounding and not quite so edgy and piercing as a Telecaster. Super light strings are the essence in this style. You cannot play this style with all the bending that's involved. You cannot play this style with anything more than, I'd say, a set of 10s on there, because most of the bending is done. As a matter of fact, for a while, I had a standard set of 10s on here, but I put a lighter B and a lighter G string on, because those are the strings that you bend on most of the time. I don't do that anymore, but that's a suggestion for someone who might be starting out, that when you do all these bending ideas that your fingers get sore. Put a lighter strings on. First of all, the country scene now in the 1990s isn't really the country scene that it was 10 years ago. The country scene now leans more towards rock. So, of course, the guitar stylings are mostly country flavored, but with a lot more distortion on them. More like what I call John Cougar Mellencamp with a cowboy hat on, or Bruce Springsteen with a cowboy hat. Much more leaning towards rock, so distortion is much more permissible. It's pretty funny, about 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, people tended to use really high-tech equipment, meaning a lot of rack gear, fancy preamps and amplifiers and stereo speakers, but it's almost gone in a retro direction where now the hip sound is to go back and play something that was hip 25, 30 years ago in the 60s, an old Telecaster and a stock Fender amp. That's why Fender's reissued all their old Telecasters and all their amplifiers, because that sound is the really popular sound now. What I would suggest is getting in a band and learning as much new and old material as you possibly can, as far as repertoire now, the new country I call it, right, and the old country, the George Jones and the Merle Haggard, and get a pretty well-versed, well-rounded repertoire, so that when you're asked to play with somebody and they call off a tune, even if you don't know it, it's very familiar because of something you've played before, and you can kind of feel your way through it as you play it. You've given yourself a distinct edge that way. I would say get yourself a cheap Fender guitar, being as they're probably the cheapest, probably $400 to $600, and a Fender amp. And an amplifier would just get a 65 reissue twin reverb for $500. You can even get one cheaper than that. You can get a smaller one, deluxe reverb for $350. Fender DeVille, brand new one for $350. 210s, 50 watts. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you got some usable sounds that you can use on your next gig, and I'd like to thank our band, John and Rick back here. And if I could tell you anything in parting, it would be that, sure, these sounds are great. It's nice to learn how they're done, hearing somebody else do them, but you really need to learn how to do them for yourself. And the way you do that is you imitate the masters. Listen to the records, listen to the people that are recording this stuff. See if you can get as close to the CD as you possibly can. And when you think you've got it, record yourself. Buy a little 4-track or a little tape recorder and record yourself playing it and see how close to the actual sound you can get. When you sound exactly like the original, then you've really got it and you can use it. So until then, keep on picking. Okay, let's bring the band back up now and see if we can't sound like a rockabilly roundup. Ooh!
That's a keeper.
Wow.